the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. For the Priestley lectures, UC has always invited lecturers who think through with us what thought and idea leadership meant in the past and means in the present. Certainly, truth and reconciliation continue to be a core societal concern for and in Canada. And UC has been aiming to take on such societal thought leadership by inviting key figures of Indigenous thought and creativity. Part 3 of our series this year will deepen our exposure to one of the most creative and renowned Indigenous minds of his generation, Jordan Abel. But before, some quick housekeeping notes. This is a hybrid event. This lecture is being live recorded. For those attending in person, a microphone will be passed around during the Q&A portion after today's lecture. Please raise your hand, and once the moderator calls on you, please wait for the microphone to ask a question. I'm sure you'll all be very eager to ask, but please wait for the microphone so that people in our remote audience are able to hear your question. For those attending virtually, live closed captioning is available for this event. The option can be turned on by clicking the closed captioning icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Please, if you're remote, use the Q&A function in Zoom to submit your questions, which will be monitored here and brought to our live moderator's attention. I would now like to call upon my colleague, Professor Emily Gilbert, Vice Principal of UC and a professor in the Canadian Studies Program and the Department of Geography and Planning, to further introduce our distinguished speaker. Over to you, Emily.
Okay, I have the great pleasure of introducing Jordan for the third time. And I'll just say, because I might not have a chance later, it's been such a delight to have you here this week. I've learned a lot, I've laughed a lot, and I'm sad to see it coming to a close, although I'm very excited for today's presentation as well. So Jordan Abel is a queer Nisga'a writer, poet, and academic. He holds a PhD in English from Simon Fraser University and is an associate professor in the Department of English and Film Studies, soon to also include creative writing in the title, at the University of Alberta. Through conceptual and experimental forms of writing, Jordan's work explores themes of settler colonialism, intergenerational trauma, and Indigenous dispossession from land and memory. He has written several books of poetry: The Place of Scraps, which came out in 2013, Uninhabited in 2015, and Indian in 2016, the last of which received the prestigious Griffin Poetry Prize. He also has written a novel, Empty Spaces, which came out in 2023, and we had the great pleasure of hearing him read from Empty Spaces on day one and got a sense of the hypnotic language that it conveys. In that talk, he also underlined the importance of read research creation. By this, he was referring to an imperative to make space for Indigenous scholars, writers, and concepts that don't easily fit into normative categories. Yesterday, in part 2, we had a beautiful conversation between Jordan and Professor David Chariandy. And the jumping off point for this was the reissue of Jordan's memoir, NISHGA, that came out in 2000, but which was reissued this summer in 2025. And David wrote the introduction, so it was a great way to engage the two of them about the memoir, and they covered much ground that I was trying to recapture in my head here, from the deeply personal examination of Indigenous identity and the legacy of residential schools, but also about things like writing style and writing process. They also talked about how to take care of yourself while writing, particularly about these deeply troubling issues, but also how to send your language and your ideas out into the world. Today, in the last of our Priestley lectures, Jordan will speak to us about a forthcoming book called Dad Era, which is coming out with Coach House Press. We've already had some seeds planted over the last couple of days about this book, which continues to build from some of his earlier work and also confronts questions around fatherhood. I think we're among the first to hear more or hear some about this book, so I'm super excited for our luck at being able to be among the first audiences of this new piece of writing. So without further ado, over to you, Jordan. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for that beautiful intro, Emily, and thank you for your introduction, Marcus. I am really delighted to be here, um, and really grateful to everyone that made this happen. So thank you for welcoming me into the space. Uh, yes, this is so I'm gonna talk about Dad Era, and I've only ever read from this forthcoming project a couple of times, and um, those were in very specific moments that weren't necessarily public events. So this will be the first time that I've read from this work in a public setting, and that's really exciting to me. And I felt like I was really, I was really excited to be able to, unveil the work, so to speak, at this moment. Um, so I think the way that I think that the way that I'll try to get at this is through uh, is it begins with my work in NISHGA. So NISHGA was my memoir that I published in 2020, um, and it's a work that is partly memoir, but also partly academic inquiry. It's also partly concrete poetry, and it's all of these other things. And the reason why I want to start out by talking about NISHGA is that the work in Dad Era builds directly from the work that I started in this memoir. Um, and also, uh, much like last night, I think the only way that I can begin reading from NISHGA or talking about it is actually by returning to the very first open letter. And I know some of you were here, some of you were there last night, but some of you weren't. So I'm going to return to that moment, just so that we're all on the same page. So this is the first page of the book. That's called An Open Letter to All My Relations. It's taken me a long while to gather up the courage to share this book with you. This book has been difficult for me to write and for me to return to. This is a book with painful subject matter. This book is about intergenerational trauma, Indigenous dispossession, and the afterlife of residential schools. It is also a book that is about sexual and physical violence, lateral violence, depression, suicide, and self-harm. While I ultimately hope that this will be a book that helps people, I also want you to take care of yourself first. If now is not the time, there will be another time. And I do mean that quite sincerely. If and when you encounter this book, I think, um, I think it may be difficult to proceed for all kinds of different reasons, and I think especially about uh, other Indigenous folks, other folks that have been impacted by the legacy of residential schools, um, but also others that for them, and for everyone, I want to. I really, felt quite strongly about trying to provide a space where one could put the book down and walk away from it, um, which is I think, this is still the most important page in the entire book to me. And I do take it quite seriously. Um, so, I did mention yesterday that when I first shared this book with my committee members, NISHGA is also my PhD dissertation. uh, when I first shared it with my committee members, they had expressed, uh, you know, they all got back to me and like fairly quickly. And had told me that this was a difficult book for them to encounter for a few different reasons, but that as people who cared for me and loved me and wanted me to succeed, that it was difficult for them to read this work. And so and they had asked for some kind of version of a trigger warning or a content warning, and that's kind of what that open letter is. But there's also another open letter that closes the book that does something totally different. And I'm happy to talk about that one too. But I think this kind of you know th- part of what I want to do is just signal to you what NISHGA is about without actually saying it out loud. Um, so yeah, I do find uh, yeah, I do find this to be a really uh, I personally find it to be a difficult book to encounter, and I understand that others feel that way as well. Um, and uh, when I was launching the book, I think it was also at a very difficult moment. So the book was actually printed in 2020 and scheduled to be published in 2020. But as I'm sure you all remember, that was the COVID year or like the first year of COVID. And so the book was delayed. And the following year, like they delayed it a year, and I think they were hoping that it would be over after a year, and obviously it wasn't. Um, but when the book finally did come out, it it came out at almost the exact time as the discovery of mass graves at many residential school sites across Canada, and that was a very difficult moment for me personally, and I think a really difficult history to reckon with. And also, I think it made the book, really topical in a way that, made me uncomfortable. um, and so I was doing all these talks and launching the book and trying to share it with people online over Zoom. And it was incredibly difficult. It was a really difficult thing to do. Um, and several of my, you know, the, several of my friends and family, tuned in at various points. Um, but I remember one really formative conversation. I can't even remember which reading it was, but my friend Uzma, who was living in Toronto at the time, but watching one of these launches on Zoom, uh, texted me after, and we had started to have this long conversation about what the book is and how I'm feeling. uh, and one of the things that she said to me really stuck with me, and she said that she felt the images in NISHGA and the concrete poetry and all of the stuff that's in that was and like all of my engagements with my dad's artwork, that those sections were the most hopeful sections for her. And that comment really resonated with me because I felt the same way. Like even in thinking about the mass graves at residential schools, even thinking about, how difficult it was to talk about this book and to launch it, I also felt that, uh, there was, a sliver, of hope that, I was writing towards, and that, I felt really happy to engage with my dad's artwork, and that felt really productive. And that writing, quote unquote writing, which is also, I guess, just making visual pieces, had been, like a really fruitful process for me. Um, so I guess I want to say that I want to say all this because that's the thread that carries forward into dad era. And or that's like one of the main threads that carries over. And I'll show you a bunch of pieces from that work, and I'll read some of it. Um, yeah, I guess, I guess for me, and I said this to David last night, uh, but the process of working with my dad's artwork in NISHGA felt really great, and also it felt not complete. That the work that I was doing there, I think was a really substantive engagement with you know I guess traditional NISGA artistic practices. Um, and I felt like I had more to I felt like I had more to offer. um, so I guess as a really quick recap, there's a couple of different visual modes in NISHGA. One of them that you see here is these double exposure photos. And you can see on the right hand side there is actually a picture of me, as like if you look really closely in the center. There's me as a small baby, and my mom is there. And then on the left one, it's my mom and my dad. This is another kind of layer of the visual work in NISHGA, where I use the shapes of my dad's artwork, and some of those double exposure photos exist within those shapes. This one, oh, it's almost perfectly centered here. So this one also uses the shapes of my dad's artwork, but the text in these images comes from empty spaces. So I always think of it as this moment where my art entwines with my dad's art, or I bring my artistic practice into conversation with his, even though it's uh, you know I don't know. It's not a reciprocal kind of dialogue. It just has the one dimension to it, because there's no response. Um, and then there's this other kind of layer of the visual work where the shapes of my dad's art and also the shapes of empty spaces are kind of severed and cut, and you know there's fragments, and those sections kind of coalesce back together, into something that looks like this, which I really like this image, and I struggle with articulating exactly how things have come together. But I think it takes cues from the previous images. And then there are moments, seem to break apart entirely and just use, certain kinds of like shapes and contours within my dad's art that also utilize the text of empty spaces. And I think this is one of like the last images in the text, but in NISHGA. But this one, it kind of returns to single photographs shaped by the contours of my dad's work, and my text is in the background, but also it's difficult to tell what's in the background and what's in the foreground in these images, and this particular image, that's within the shape of my dad's painting of the frog, is the steps of the Vancouver Art Gallery. And my dad and I, like, we only ever met like one time in my adult life. And we took a picture together in Vancouver on these steps, and yeah, I really searched for that picture, and I don't know what happens. I don't know when you have those like digital cameras from like 2003 or something. Like, who knows where that SD card went? So I don't have that picture anymore, but that's why that's why it's the image of the Vancouver Art Gallery. Um, and here's like a couple more that are actually a little bit harder to see. But on the left is Siwash Rock in Vancouver, and I actually don't even totally know what the photo is in the right hand image. Anyway, uh, that this is the first page, or this is one of the first pages from Dad era, and I will flip through some of these as I read Dad era to you, and you can, yeah, you can, you know, yeah, I'll just go through this. um, and I think I have enough time to actually read most of this text, because it is actually a fairly short book. Um, okay. Oh, got the wrong file open. Here we go. Oh, so the book starts with a quotation from an anonymous internet source, and the quotation is, "Welcome to the world, dear son/daughter name," and there's brackets around son/daughter name. So I think it's intended, if you're, I don't know, can't write a single sentence, you can just like plug your kid's name in there, and that's something that you can write. uh, but I, when Phoenix was born, or after she was born, like I started uh, reading all of these anonymous parenting tips online, and that's one of the points of origin for this book. Dear Phoenix, you are a small child. I am a person who lives with you. A dad is a parent is a human. I had this crazy idea that I could never escape my father's shadow. A dad is garbage is gone. First, my father disappeared, and then my mother abandoned all rational thought. Did you know that my father taught me nothing at all? To be creative, to be loving, to be generous and kind and human were all lessons that I learned alone in the snow. You are a fireball. You are a being of infinite love. A friend once said to me, "Fuck dads." Did you know that being alone is sometimes terrifying? If a dad exists or doesn't exist, can we still have breakfast for dinner? If a dad falls over in the middle of the woods, will anybody be able to hear his jokes? You are a cyclone. I am a human being, and I have made more mistakes than I can count. If you remember one lesson from your childhood, I hope it's that snow leopards eat meat and that you are made out of meat. I know it's a cliche, but you really are supposed to love yourself. Did you know that while we were driving home one night, your mom said to Did you know that while we were driving home one night, you said to your mom, "I was nothing," and then you gave me a name, and now I am something? You are brilliant and shining and the most annoying kid at the indoor playground. Did you know that you can be a contestant on MasterChef Junior if you want? A dad is vapor. A dad is a person that gives all of himself to himself. You and your tiny fists shape and reshape me every day. I once tried to figure out what Indigenous knowledge transmission was supposed to look like by reshaping my dad's art, but it turns out all I had to do was learn how to. But it turns out all I had to do was teach you how to make dinosaurs out of Play-Doh. Did you know that I'm not Indian enough for some, but too Indian for others? I am a world away from you in a popular Paris bakery, and I am not too afraid that I don't miss you at all right now. Did you know that anchors will only sink to the bottom of the river? To be honest, it's hard to imagine a world where you and I don't exist together. Even though you are a tiny being, you somehow contain infinite shit. A parent is a person who wears jeans. Sometimes parents are people who write books. When I look at you, I see a whole world on the precipice of destruction. A hero is a fiction. A father used to be a child. You have shown me what the world looks like when we open our eyes, and now I can't wait to go back to sleep. Bright children are those that sometimes see themselves in the mirror. You and I sometimes share one heart. Maybe it's true that I would climb a mountain just to see you smile, but maybe it's not. Ever since you came into my life, I have not been able to keep up on my emails. I This is not a line in the poem, but I think a big part of this work for me is that I feel like, I'm a joyful human being, and I think I'm kind of funny. And maybe I'm wrong about that. But I really wanted to write a book that was funny and also serious. And, you know, NISHGA is not very funny. It's hard to make residential schools funny. Uh, but I feel like that was a dimension that was missing from my creative practice. That, it seemed to not include all of who I am. Um, yeah. I am no expert in racial passing, but I do know that declining invitations to the Calgary Stampede is one of the most necessary things I've ever had to do. Did you know that all we had to do to arrive here on the couch in front of our giant flat screen was just to survive an attempted genocide? Your mom and I are two human beings. I know it's a cliche, but no matter where you are, I will promise to exist in your life. I don't know if I can teach you calculus, but I can teach you how to write an erasure poem with a Sharpie and our copy of Shakespeare's collected works. Did you know that on the day you were born, I saw the odometer on our sieve click over from 99,999 kilometers to 100,000 kilometers, and I thought to myself, what a great day. A day is a universe is a broken fingernail. Sometimes I am beside myself. The thing about having one NISGA parent and one white parent is that both of us will be equally excited to see the new Wes Anderson film. A person can sometimes learn from another person. A gender binary can be exploded. A heart is a cloud is a heart. Sometimes I used to be afraid, and now I just feel tired. As you open your eyes in the morning and begin to remember where you are, can you hear the sound of the highway on the outskirts of this subdivision? I am no expert on Indigenous futurity, although maybe I am. That is what I called the talk. I am no expert on Indigenous futurity. But ever since you came into my life, I am now actively trying to imagine a future where you can live and thrive and exist in the world. The outside world in the winter is sometimes just the water park at West Edmonton Mall. I have been alive long enough to know that I don't know anything. You are a person and I love you. The greatest day of my life was October 1st, 2006. I can't wait for you to beat me at Mario Kart. A friend of mine once told me that all this writing about you doesn't really mean anything without including the struggle. But the thing is, even though there have been hard times, I'd rather just celebrate our joy together because joy resists the settler consumption of Indigenous narratives. A mountain is a rock is a scenic viewpoint ahead. I used to think that being a writer was the most significant thing I could do with my life, and now I know the greatest thing I can do is master the art of air frying a frozen chicken nugget. Sometimes the world is just a place we exist. A person who loves you unconditionally is probably a good person. I am not ashamed to say that I don't know much. Mike Myers once said something about parenting in an article I read on the internet. Being a parent is about keeping you alive. A truly rich man is someone with lots of money. If I could have one wish, it would be to fly on a spaceship to another planet. A good parent is someone who exists in your life. Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, Wayne Gretzky are names of people that exist in the world. The bond between a parent and a child can sometimes be explained with words. A family is a gathering of people. An inspirational quote can be printed out and pinned to a cubicle wall. Examples of strong parenting include people who were born before us. No matter what time it is, you could probably use a nap. I could probably use a nap. Did you know that I've already received dozens of immunotherapy injections so that you can one day own a dog that you absolutely may not name after your favorite member of the Paw Patrol? Unknown authors never give good parenting advice. You are a person in the world now. I am a person who lives with you. I used to think my only path in life was to drop out of school and start dealing cocaine with your Uncle Lee, and now I regularly buy sweatpants at Costco. An essential guide to parenting should include several comprehensive reviews of noise-canceling headphones. I am a person that sometimes doesn't think enough. There are thousands of different situations that require me to say no. When you grow up, I hope you're able to remember that I once knew all the words to the Baby Shark song. I am astonished by how quickly you went from zero to hot mess during this interdepartmental research symposium. If you could only choose one movie to watch indefinitely for the rest of time, why was it a Shaun the Sheep movie, Farmageddon? Did you know that it was me that taught me to value myself? Before you came into my life, I had this crazy idea that you had to be a perfect human being to be a parent. Being a parent is like canoeing in the middle of the ocean. You are only as strong as what you can lift. The most influential teacher is the one you listen to. You made a world out of our hallway. A friend once said to me, I never thought you'd be responsible for yourself, let alone another human being. The truth is that sometimes I don't love being in the world, but I do love being with you. A person can be a bastard, and that bastard can be a father. When I say I love you, what I mean is please stop hitting me. A dad is someone who doesn't ever exist in your life. A father is someone who's on the other end of a video call. Outside of hockey, you are my number one priority. My greatest joy in life is the last few minutes after you fall asleep when I can finally catch up on exactly 4 minutes of premium television before I also fall asleep. My love for you will never end unless you decide to cheer for a team other than the Edmonton Oilers. I am supposed to tell you that I think you're my biggest accomplishment. But truthfully, I think my biggest accomplishment in life was winning the Griffin Poetry Prize. That's a joke. Those are all jokes. I'm so proud of so proud of you for making friends with Shrimp Louie, the shrimp mascot who works outside of Bubba Gump Shrimp in Phase 4 of West Edmonton Mall. And that's true. That dude's name is Shrimp Louie. And he just walks around in a shrimp costume trying to get people to eat shrimp. It's a, it's a good job, I think. I've never quite been whole, but maybe the closest I'll ever be is when I'm sitting on the couch next to you. We are lucky in the sense that we no longer live on the poverty line. The outside world exists just beyond these precision cut triple pane windows. Did you know that half the Father's Day cards at Shoppers have golf balls on them? If I'm guiding you through your life, then you should know in advance that I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. A father can help a daughter buy cool things at the mall. Never doubt that you are a whole human being who deserves to be loved and treated with respect. Maybe I don't need to say this to you because it's so obvious, but the truth is, no one said it to me, so I'm not going to take that chance with you. I once went on a road trip with your mom and your Auntie Mia, and we listened to the greatest hits of Starship. And for a few minutes while staring out the window, I tried to imagine what life might be like with you in it. Did you know that family is sometimes just the people you're around? I don't know everything about I don't know everything about being sober, but I do know that if I kept doing drugs, I'd probably be dead by now. That's also true. I'll be honest with you. One day in the future, I'm going to blink out of existence and float up into the big dollarama in the sky with everyone else that's moved on from this place. But for now, while death means nothing to you, I'm happy to pretend that you and I will continue sitting on this couch together until the end of time. Did I ever tell you about that time I accidentally bought cocaine from a Cuban drug dealer inside of an abandoned theme park in Veradero? That's actually not a joke. That's a true story. I mean, these are all also true. Um, as you open your eyes, can you see the headlights sweep across our stucco ceiling? To be honest, I do miss your Uncle John, and I wish that he was still alive to meet you. But after he started doing meth every day, there is very little of him left that I could recognize. You bring me great joy every day that I get to spend with you. Did you know that you have already seen every single season of HBO's The Wire? I am not lost in the world without you, but I do miss you sometimes when I'm at the office. Did you know that we are both indebted to the contours of the North Saskatchewan River? Oh, and here's one of the river slides. Uh, the river, North Saskatchewan River, also appears in empty spaces quite a bit. And if you have a chance to look at that book, there's all of these images where the river exists, but it also exists here in this book. May your happiness swell outwards from every time I said yes to ice cream for breakfast. Did you know that being a parent feels a lot like being kicked repeatedly in the face while doing a puzzle that's trying to run away from you. A father is absent is missing. I used to think that living and dying in Burnaby was a real possibility. The greatest moment I had with my dad was not a real thing. You are joy, our fire. Your birthday was full of tears. I can't say I won't make more mistakes, but I will say I will make more mistakes. You are a lightning bolt. A tree is a leaf is a house. I'm not sure if I can tell you all of this in person, so I'm going to write it down line by line as it comes to me. The greatest day of my life was July 26, 2020. I haven't seen you in an hour, and to be honest, I'm having the time of my life. I wouldn't be anywhere if it wasn't for your mom. Did you know that if you do too many drugs, you start to forget simple things like how to have a conversation and what month it is? I am no expert on Indigenous parenting, but I do know that surviving Canada up to this point is nothing short of a miracle. I don't know a lot about the world, but I do know that you should start saving now for your retirement. And also invest in real estate like 40 years ago. I read the best parenting advice on a subreddit about drywall anchors. I once saw your mom write an entire novel on her phone while holding you in her arms. Did you know that being surrounded by love is what's supposed to happen? I am no great person, but I did once eat steak and lobster in the same meal. Did you know that it's precisely because your mom is an amazing parent that I am able to get away with being a mediocre parent? You are a human being with a face. When I say I love you, what I mean is please go to sleep. A family is just a person and another person and maybe a friend or two. We are lucky in the sense that we live in the delivery radius for 3 separate Boston Pizza locations. That's actually a Billy Ray Belcourt reference. Um, did you know that I wrote 5 books before this one, and not a single one, or not one of them contained a single laugh? Which I did say that at some point. I read that line to somebody, and they were like, "Oh no, there's some funny moments in the place of scraps." And I thought about that, and I think maybe that's true. But this line works better if there's 0 laughs in the previous book. A dad is a child is a ghost. The thing about climate change is that it's not personally my fault, but I am responsible for your well-being, and this gives me pause. If I can teach you just one lesson, it's that it actually is very important to brush and floss your teeth. A father can be bisexual and urban and NISGA and tired. Did you know that bisexuality is not something that you choose, but rather something that chooses you? When I close my eyes at night, I am often thinking about how peaceful these moments are before you wake up again. A child is a whirlwind is a pocket full of rocks. The greatest song ever written about Edmonton is called Connor McDavid by Cadence Weapon. Is it just me, or does it feel like we mostly live in a world without dads? Did you know that I haven't done the paperwork for your application for Native status because I am afraid the logic of elimination inherent in Canada's blood quantum laws will disqualify you from legally being considered an Indian? When I wake up in the morning, your stinky feet are often pushed up against my face. True story. uh, did you know that we bought central air conditioning just in time for wildfire season? I used to think I'd never be a good parent because I didn't have good parents. I used to wonder how I could make space for a kid in a world that is so deeply broken. And now I'm just sharing these thoughts with strangers in bookstores as my dad era poems. Did you know that you are a whole person? If I can give you any advice, it's that you should think twice before following any of my advice. We are lucky in the sense that my paychecks are deposited directly into my bank account and we only live a few minutes from the mall. The best days of my life have been spent with you and your mom. Did I ever tell you about the time that my friend James got mugged by a couple of guys with katanas who took his wallet and then hopped into their Ford F-150 and just drove away? The thing about being an urban, depressed, bisexual Nisga'a poet with a PhD is that everyone will recognize you at the local queer bookstore. A mentor once told me, don't get a PhD or enter into academia. So I got a PhD and entered into academia. A different mentor once told me, don't write a book, write a dissertation. So I wrote a book. What I'm trying to say is that if you just do the opposite of what some people tell you, then you might end up in academia having written a book. A human is a child, is a parent. Your birthday parties are well documented on Instagram. I once went to a research retreat about biodiversity at the Banff Center, and I ended up sharing some of these lines in a well air-conditioned conference room while a businessman in a cowboy hat paced around the hallway outside, talking quietly to someone on his Bluetooth headset. I used to get so depressed that I couldn't get out of bed in the morning. Did you know that it breaks my heart when you don't want to let go of my arm while I'm trying to drop you off at daycare? The thing about celebrating Indigenous joy is that sometimes people will still ask me to put all my pain on display, even though it's the joy that keeps all of this floating along. When I say I love you, what I mean to say is ketchup is not a meal. The thing about being in the world is that sometimes good things happen. I am no expert on living, but I have written several books of poetry that punch up at historic inequities. A light is a heart is a hallway. If I can pass on some wisdom that I've learned the hard way, it's that you are loved and you belong here. I do sometimes wonder what would happen if we just let you live at zoo camp for the rest of your life. Did you know that I refuse to apologize for celebrating our joy because Billy Ray Belcourt tells us that Indigenous joy is an ethics of resistance? Welcome to the world, Phoenix. And that's the last line of the poem. And this is the penultimate page. That's the whole thing. Now you don't have to buy the book. Thank you. Yeah, thank you all for sticking around. I think that took me a few more minutes to read through, but yeah, I really appreciate everyone here and everyone that's online for listening and thinking alongside me. And also, as we transition to this question period, I should let you know that I went to the Penguin Random House offices this morning and they gave me a bunch of books. So I have books to give to you if you ask me a question. Yeah. So I'll come hang out here and we'll talk. Yeah. Okay. Oh, got a question right over here.
Well, thank you for your presentation. I
Thanks.
regret that I couldn't make it the last 2 nights because I had other engagements.
Of course.
Your
Yeah,
poetry is captivating and moving.
thanks.
It's not my area of academic expertise, but I found the personal touches strong, emotional, funny,
Yeah.
profoundly insightful. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah,
I'm a political scientist.
cool.
So if you don't mind, and with an interest in Canadian political economy.
Yes.
So I think it was that last year's Priestley lecture that we had a Indigenous professor from University of Manitoba. He may have been Métis. I know he's from Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan. And I asked, and I raised this question because I saw the NISHGA referred to on the front page of today's Globe and Mail, as I did last year at the same Priestley lecture. And the story is about the NISHGA project on the West Coast. And the thrust of the story is about the divisions within the Indigenous communities and how that can be or not navigated by the federal government.
Sure.
And I asked how he felt about resource development. And he said, well, the pattern has been on the government's part of divide and conquer. Then a month ago, I attended a lecture here as well by a leading female Indigenous poet who, in the course of her comments, who is an environmentalist and was imprisoned apparently for her environmental activism. And in the course of her comments, she also mentioned the divide and conquer approach. So my question is, do Indigenous peoples who are in favor or are opposed to resource development, do they not have agency? Is this all a matter of manipulation by the federal government? Should we not respect those who are both in favor of development and those that aren't? So that's my first question. The second
Cool.
question is a lot shorter because
Sure.
you referred to mass graves. So after you respond to the first, I want to ask you about that.
Okay, I'm going to decline both of those questions, and I'm happy to talk to you afterwards. But you know, I kind of just want to talk about the stuff that I presented on, and you know, with respect, I I appreciate your thoughts, and if you have other questions that are about this work, I'm happy to engage with them. Yeah, thanks.
Great, thanks. I think we already have another question at the front, but I see Sterling and then here and then here.
I have a question about Phoenix,
Sure, yeah. I'm happy to talk about Phoenix.
about how you thought about Phoenix before and how you came to name Phoenix and what that represents for you and for your family and your community.
Yeah. I think, the short answer is actually that Phoenix is the only name that my partner and I agreed on. uh, and, you know, I, I think she suits it really well. But the other week, I was just like hanging out with her, and she told me, she said, Dad, I don't like my name. And I was like, oh, cool. What other name do you want? And she said, Jessica. And I was like, right on. And then like an hour later, I was like, so you want to be called Jessica? And she was like, what are you talking about? Yeah, I think naming is so important. And also, I think, for her, I really, or like, from my approach to parenting, I really want to, create a space where like she can, choose her own name if she wants to. And that, that one, that name is an attempt to, put language to her being, but that maybe it's not the only attempt. Maybe there are other attempts, and I want to leave that door open for her. But thanks, yeah, thank you. Hopefully that is something.
That's great. Since you have the microphone, we'll go with you, but I will not forget you, Sterling.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no, it's, you've got it now. Go.
Yeah.
I'll walk it over to you. Okay. Thank you so much for the 3 talks the past 3 days
Cool.
and
Yeah.
for your work. It really speaks to me on a personal level, and then as someone who also engages with conceptual and experimental poetry. I have 2 questions, but you can choose one. I was just wondering why the framing as anti-colonial poetics, because that's the framing I kind of choose for the work I write on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and then because people are always like, why not this? Why not that? So I'm wondering if you could share your thoughts.
Mhm.
Or if question 2 would be, you kind of referenced citing like Reddit, and then I know, and you, I think you do similar work in like NISHGA with like citing Facebook
Yeah.
and other sources. So thoughts? I don't know if those are questions.
Well, I do think it's to answer the second part first. I do think it's really important to cite where our knowledges come from, and where our ideas come from, and I feel like, like we get them from all kinds of places, and I think, in the spirit of, just being honest and transparent about where some of that information comes from, sometimes it comes from Reddit, sometimes it comes from Facebook, sometimes, sometimes that stuff, or always that stuff needs to be, you know, fact checked and, followed through on. But also, I feel like part of it for me is just like a gesture towards, like, I don't even know if it's radical forms of citation, but just like, an open citation where, I want to point towards, um, like I really found it like important to name my friend Uzma, who, sparked, or like who commented on this idea that I had, and that really led me somewhere. And I feel like, that was an important part of, the intellectual work that I did, is to, think about what she told me, and to, name her, in her involvement in this process. I, when I teach grad classes, sometimes, really good groups of students will cite each other, and they'll, be open about, where this information is coming from. And I think that kind of makes them better thinkers. Like it helps to grow something. Um, yeah, so I'm, really open to, all kinds of information that comes from everywhere. And yeah, I and also I thought it was funny that I was on a subreddit about drywall anchors and people were talking about parenting. It was in the context of needing drywall anchors because like a kid had like ripped out like, a towel bar from like a bathroom or something. The first part of your question about anti-colonial poetics, um, I found that to be a really powerful framework to be in, and I really prefer it to, um, you know, like whatever decolonial is, because that feels like, you know, I don't know. I feel like, we're folks are obsessed with decolonization for a while, and then also part of, the root of that term, I feel like seems to imply that it's possible, to decolonize, and it's not. It's the like, I think we have to work against those frameworks, but also, imagine, I think, you know, um, imagine what's possible and to work within frameworks that are possible. And so that's kind of why I landed on the anti-colonial approach. And I think it makes sense for me right now. I'd be totally curious to hear why it makes sense for you. Yeah, and also, we could have that conversation after if you want. I'd love to hear more about that. Cool. And I'm open to other approaches too.
Well, well,
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I know. There's folks online who couldn't hear
Yeah.
that last part, but
that's the only reason
yeah,
for the mic.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's okay. It's fine. It's fine.
It's all good.
Good.
Yeah.
Go over to you now.
Sure. Thank you so much. I think your work is really beautiful and has a lot of vulnerability in it, which I wanted to ask about. I do a lot of work in my own community, and the advice I keep getting from my doctoral supervisors and folks on my committee is like, don't bring too much of yourself into your work because you don't want to get critiqued on it. Like in terms of like really vulnerable stuff, like
Yeah.
when we work in our communities. And I'm just curious for you, your dad's artwork, the storytelling about your relationship, like parenting, a kid, all of that is front and center here.
Yeah.
And it sounds like your first book also is a lot of deeply personal things and is also your dissertation. So I'm just curious if you can speak to sort of what it means to blend the academic piece with the personal and why that maybe is important to you or not.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really, yeah. I have an answer for this question. And maybe I have several answers. Um, maybe the first answer is to say that, I was also given the advice, not to do things that are personal in academic spaces. And then there's also, a whole, uh, area, called auto theory that, really celebrates, thinking about, the ways in which, our lives and thinking through our lives, shape our understandings of the world. And that I mentioned this a little bit last night, but I think that area has its whole history, that is really important to, um yeah, it's really important to pay attention to. And that, one of the things, is that, and one of the things that's like floating out there is that, the personal is always political. uh and so I think that, doing work that's personal is incredibly important. And also doing it in the space of academia is really difficult. Because, even the most sensitive, supervisors, like people who are surrounding you, like it's sometimes hard to parse that out and, to separate, you know, uh, it's hard to separate yourself from the work, even when you're doing things that aren't personal. So when you are engaging in that stuff, it's, yeah, it can be really, kind of slippery. But also, I think it's deeply necessary, like one of the, you know, I, I think that, maybe like maybe the way that I've, done things, is kind of on the more extreme end of the spectrum. But in Indigenous literary studies, for example, it's very common, for scholars to position themselves and to bring the personal into it, because one of the questions that, that they're that you're I think you're supposed to answer in that field is why you're interested, why you're working with this work. And, I think it moves well beyond, the kind of, problematic like identity politics that happened before that moment. But it's important, I think, to position yourself in relation to the things that you study. And that, sometimes people have really good answers. Like I'm studying, Cree literature because I'm Cree. Well, I'm not Cree, but, as an example. uh, and, uh, and that, that's, you know, that's really, I feel like that's one of the things that is really important about work that happens in Indigenous literary studies, is that it does those things. And for me, like I really, you know, I wanted to talk about, you know, for NISHGA, like I really wanted to talk about intergenerational trauma, and I really wanted to talk about um, the impact that residential schools continue to have on us and on me in particular. And it felt like the only way through that, you know, was actually to think about my own relationships and, you know, how I am implicated and, you know, within these stories. um and and that, you know, my hope is that you know, by doing things that are really deeply personal, that, you know, even though they're very specifically about me and my positionality, um, that others would, you know, find connections, you know, to those kinds of stories. Um, yeah, I think that's the best way I can answer that. And you know, I don't know. I also, you know, I guess part of it too is that I am an academic. I exist in the academy, but I also see myself as, you know, uh, as kind of an artist first, and so my, you know, my, you know, I guess difficulty, you know, is that I've always just been trying to find ways to exist in the academy, and, you know, survive here. And you know, sometimes, you know, sometimes, you know, the work that I do, you know, is really, it doesn't intend for the academy to be its, you know, main audience. And then also it does get taken up, you know, that way sometimes. Um, and so, you know, and I guess this is also to say that, you know, as a poet or nonfiction author, like I guess I kind of live a bit of a public life, you know, where I've got, you know, you know, a bunch of, you know, my life is, you know, just out there for people to read. And that that carries with it its own host of issues. And yeah. Cool.
Okay, thank you. I have another question.
Oh, over here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi. I really am always taken by the formal work that your poems are doing. I think about reading Nishka and the moments that talked about hinges, and then, you know, when I read it, sort of realizing the work itself was modeling a hinge, and I was like, oh my, I was furious actually with how brilliant it sort of was, and in the best way. And
I'd love to incite fury.
yes. And to learn also like the particular cadences and rhythms of empty spaces, and like the way form was enacted there. And I think you've sort of gestured to some of the formal pickups between Nishka and this in that era. But I wondered if you might like to speak a bit more about some of the things you were thinking about with regard to form or rhythm, specifically, maybe if you like this prompt, around the sort of form and cadences of a joke, because humor seems so essential to this one. So that's my prompt.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I thought about, I mean, I'm thinking about humor a lot, in part because, you know, as I said, you know, that wasn't a central concern for previous moments, but or for previous books, but also those other books, you know, had these like really intense kinds of constraints and forms within them. So when I was yeah, so when I was writing Dad era, you know, I really kind of felt like, you know, there's a certain, you know, there's a real tension in how humor works on the page versus how it works, you know, in a kind of live, you know, audience setting. And I talked to a couple of friends who are comedians and also writers, and you know, the timing, the timing of jokes is extremely difficult. And you know, I don't know at all, you know, if I've mastered it, but I did think that it was really fun and interesting to think about, you know, the structure the structure of a joke and how that might also be a constraint, and also how that and also like within that within the book, you know, one of the shapes, one of the recurring structures, or one of the structures is the way that, you know, some jokes, or, you know, sentential kinds of constructions recur. And, you know, I think there's, you know, some energy and humor that kind of builds out of that. And, you know, and there's also, you know, some more serious things that recur too. But you know, I was really deeply interested in trying to think, you know, about what's funny, but also what's true. And, you know, not just to like, yeah, to try to, you know, merge those things together, I think was really tricky for me. And again, I don't know how successful I was, but, you know, I think, you know, a big part of my process as a writer, like just thinking about all of the things that I've written, is that I've really tried to differentiate each project, and I've really, you know, wanted to challenge myself and to do something, you know, maybe not completely different, but something different than the last one. And I've felt that, you know, that's you know, yeah, that's, you know, has been like a challenging road to go down. But also like a really rewarding one. Like I'm really, you know, proud that, you know, when you line up all of my books, like you can't point to two and be like, these are the same book. Because I feel like, you know, that's a real thing that happens in the world. And some people are really great at writing the same book over and over again. And, you know, I think I just, you know, I just want to do something that's a little bit different than that, and that, you know, really requires, you know, me as an artist to stretch my you know, my practice and to do things that feel uncomfortable. Like it like writing Dad Era, like it felt very uncomfortable to, you know, write in this way that, you know, is kind of confessional and lyric, and, you know, wasn't you know, use the structures of jokes, but like didn't have these other kinds of constraints that, you know, previous works had. And, you know, I think that yeah, I, I sometimes think I'm, you know, one of like an ideal candidate for, you know, arts grants, because they always ask like, you know, how is this like growing your, you know, like how are you growing as an artist? And I feel like, you know, maybe that's what I've been trying to do, is like I've, you know, been really trying to, you know, learn things and, you know, move beyond what I thought I was capable of. And that, you know, isn't, I don't think that's always successful. Has not always been successful for me, but I think it is interesting and challenging. And yeah, hopefully that kind of answers your question. I know I kind of went a little bit of a different place with it, but yeah. Thanks.
Great question. Thanks. Over to you, Kieran.
Kieran,
Hey,
what's up, buddy?
yeah, just related to our conversation last night about
Yeah.
difficulties of writing humor.
Yeah.
Just felt that you really nailed it, and I felt that it was
thanks.
like deeply funny. So well done on that.
Thanks. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Um, I was struck by the um, the lines about sort of wholeness.
Hmm,
I think
yeah.
paraphrasing here, but you said that you were not whole, and then towards the end, I think it was your daughter was whole, something
That's
along those
right.
lines.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm exploring sort of that question of wholeness versus not wholeness in my work. Um, and I don't really know if it's a question, but I was just wondering if you could talk a little more about that and sort
Sure.
of your
Yeah.
thinking around that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, my feeling, or, you know, my personal feelings about wholeness, I think, you know, kind of stem from yeah, they stem from like these deep-seated like childhood traumas, you know, about I hate this phrasing, but like I really hate the term mixed race, and I feel like part of it is that you know when that came up as when I was a kid, like it always felt like you know I'm not I'm not all of one thing. I am, part of one thing and part of another thing, and that, whatever that adds up to. But also that like, the one thing is like more visible, and also like, it just like, I felt like I, was always confronted with these like feelings of like being partial or like incomplete or not whole, um, and other folks would bring that to me too, and that was really messed up. And I really, have tried um, to confront those feelings and to, move past them and to, uh, feel comfortable like being, a whole being. But also, that's a struggle. That's a struggle for me. And so, when I was, thinking about Phoenix, I was thinking, you know, like she's, not to use, the colonial blood quantum logic, but she's, a quarter Nisga'a. And, even that feels like really weird to say because I hate it when, fractions get involved. Um, but also she's, very light skinned and kind of white passing. And I feel like, there's I feel like, she won't confront. I feel like, in terms of like, racial identity, like she won't confront it in the same way that I did. And that's connected to me somehow, with this conversation about wholeness, completeness, and um, you know, yeah. So I guess, I'm really, you know, as I'm just thinking out loud, but thinking about how these, like how that kind of came up in my life, and also, you know, what I owe to my daughter, and the kinds of conversations that I owe to her, the kinds of thinking that she's indebted to, maybe, and uh, yeah, I do truly, hope that she doesn't encounter the world in the same way that I did, and that maybe that's the only thing I can try to do as a parent. I don't know if that's the right way to go. Other parents, please give me advice. Yeah, does that make sense? Yeah, thanks, Karen.
Siobhan, was there a question? Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, an online question from guest.
Guests.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful presentation, Jordan. You engage with your father's art in both a very specific and complex way, literally and emotionally. How do you hope your daughter engages with your art and Indigenous creativity in a wider context?
Yeah, I guess I really do hope that she I mean she really likes art. She likes reading things. She likes watching like films and like TV shows. She really likes dance, and like so she's engaged in all of these like art forms, from a really young age. And also, I think this like how she's going to engage with Indigenous literatures, and also how she might engage with my body of work, I think is an open question. um I did like a short reading for the just like a private reading for this group of um Indigenous writers a few weeks ago, and I read part of Dad Era to them, and Phoenix was in the room, and I was happy for her to overhear. Uh, and during that reading, she found some kind of like metal stick that was in my office and just kept like jabbing at me in my ribs, and that felt really fitting. So I don't know, is that the I don't know if that's an engagement with literature, but you know, is a very embodied reaction. But you know, I have offered to read it to her before, and I've tried to read it to her, and I want her to hear it, you know, and also, you know, she's not interested right at this moment, and I think that's cool. And you know, I'm not gonna force it on her, but you know, it's there when it makes sense. For yeah, it's there for her when she wants it. And also, you know, I'm a little bit nervous, like a little bit nervous for her encountering NISHGA because it's such a difficult text, and I don't know how I'm gonna broach that conversation. But you know, I think, you know, I assume that she'll one day either want to engage with it or not. And, you know, I think I'll have to figure that out, you know, in the moment. Unless people have advice for me, which again, I'm happy to take.
I'm going to ask just a fast one for myself.
Oh,
Okay.
sure. Yeah.
Yep.
Please do,
You
Siobhan.
had a line, which was, if a dad falls in the forest, will anyone hear his dad jokes?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what is your favorite dad joke?
Oh my gosh. uh it's, you know, it's a tried and true dad response, which is uh you know, when Phoenix says, I'm hungry, I say, hi hungry, I'm dad. And it's just that structure. Is my favorite one. As really you know, low hanging fruit of dad jokes, but I really like it. Yeah. Cool.
Wonderful. So I'm very aware of time and that we're drawing close to 6 o'clock.
Well, I just want to say thank you all for being such an amazing audience, and you know, I'm happy to talk to you individually. And also, those of you who ask questions, please come take a book. I've got I've got 3 books here. This one is called Carving Space. It's an anthology that publishes the winners and the shortlists of the Indigenous Voices Awards from the last 5 years. And I edited this book along with Carly Baker and Maddie Redden. And I think it's really great. And there's a lot of really cool writers who are in this volume. And then the other 2 books I have are also cool. So I've got 2 copies of Tanya Tagak's Split Tooth, which, if you haven't read it, is amazing and really sexy and funny and super weird. And I dig it. And then the other one is one that I'm sure you all know. It's I've got 2 copies of Brother by David Chariandy. So those of you that ask questions, please come take a book. First come, first serve. And yeah, thank you all so much. Yeah, thank you. Maybe Marcus, do you have final things you want to say?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, you have to.
So I often also get to comment as the last person, which I often abuse, so I apologize for that as well. I do love telling people, I'm not a poet myself, but I do love telling people about the way in which the formal use of language can unlock knowledge that is not there in everyday language or in prose. And I found your reading so powerful because you use the discipline of your formal language on the one side, and then the thematization of knowing in the ever repeated question. And it's not, I also know that it's always a question. There's always the question, what do people know already without maybe saying it? And then the question of identity and family. So I was deeply moved by your poetry, and I really appreciate you bringing this poetry to us today. So this concludes, and now I'm going back to my, This concludes tonight's lecture. Thank you to our speaker, Jordan Abel. Thank you to all of you for attending and for your thoughtful questions. Thank you to Professor Emily Gilbert for moderating the on-site, and Professor Siobhan O'Flynn for moderating the online portion of the Q&A. This is the last endowed lecture of UC for this calendar year. There's another lecture scheduled next year, Tuesday, March 31st, 2026 at 4:30 in this very room. It's the Alexander Lecture in English Literature, and our speaker will be Nandini Das, Professor of Early Modern English Literature and Culture, who is about to publish the Oxford Handbook of Travel, Race, and Identity in Early Modern England. So I hope to see many of you back here in March and hopefully also in between. But thank you so much again for coming to Toronto, for sharing your thoughts and your art with us for the last 3 days. So thank you very, very much.